Walk me through the experience of the divine, the experience of God. What is it like to have, for those who've never had this kind of experience, a firsthand uh, encounter with the divine?
It's just the most beautiful thing you can ever imagine. And I'll invoke another one of my experiences that I had at one point. So, what happens, and this is like the classic ego death or ego disillusion that a lot of people speak of. I had in my visual view a tapestry. And as you know, a tapestry is made up of a bunch of quilts that are sewn together. And each of these quilts in my visual field were a representation of something or someone that I associated with the definition of myself and who I was. And bit by bit, I could see the threads unwinding. And each of these things were just flying off into the abyss, into absolute darkness. And it's difficult when you see these things you define yourself as sort of go away. You have to surrender to that experience and allow these things to go. And then at the core, the very middle quilt that goes away is you, who you think you are, your name even sometimes, your preferences, your attachments, all of these things that you think that you are inside personally. And when you allow that to go away, at least in my experience, once I surrendered to that final thing, unthreading and moving into the abyss, what came after that, and it seemed fairly quickly after I surrendered, was this absolute feeling of transcendence, a transcendence of consciousness. It almost felt like an evolution of consciousness, like a micro evolution. Um, and the reason I think it feels like that is because you're connecting to the universal absolute intelligence of spirit, of the universe, of cosmos, whatever you want to call it. And when you have that feeling, it feels like you're connecting to a mind or something that is structured. It's not just a random experience of like, oh, I feel so good that it feels like I'm being lifted and it just feels so great and so euphoric that it may be mistaken as an experience of the divine or an experience of God. But no, it actually is God or the divine. I mean, use whatever word you want, but it shows itself, it presents itself in that structure, within that form. It doesn't just present itself as euphoria. And to me, it was so amazing because you can speak to it and it can speak back to you. You can ask it questions and it shows you things. Sometimes it speaks in English to me. Sometimes I will get messages of like, you know, this is what the answer to the question is. But usually it's like a feeling. Like actually, my most recent mushroom experience, I was able to get to this place where I was merging with the divine, with all of consciousness, all of nature, everything. And it like gave me this little wink and it said, like, ask me anything, ask me any question. This is a Reddit AMA or something, you know? And I was able to ask any question and I got the answer. But the thing about it, like the catch was the answer wasn't presented to me in English. It was presented to me as a feeling. Like it would sort of say to me, I can't tell you in your language, but I'm going to give you this. And it gave me an experience, which was the answer to the question that I had. If that doesn't make any sense, it probably shouldn't because it's hard to dualistically bring these things back and put them into language. But I think the real core of the mystical experience is really that transcendence of consciousness, that feeling that you're connecting to something that is larger than you, that is more intelligent than you. And by larger, I mean huge, like absolutely gargantuan, so big that there are no human measurements or conceptions of size. And one of the cool things that it showed me too was in terms of like how we measure size, how we measure importance. Um, it put the science that we use in a little box and it sealed that box up and it showed me like this is just a tiny tiny slice of what reality is, and it's only a slice that you can determine and infer upon based off of the senses that you have, because we just for some reason think that because we view the world within our senses that, oh, the world must just be that. That's just what reality is, according to what we see, feel, hear, smell. But reality seems to be an information field, and we just happen to be biological entities that are able to take in that information via, perception of our senses. And it really did show me that in a big way.
In some of the God experiences that I've had, and I've heard other people talk about, it gets difficult to language it because in the experience itself, you realize that that's how humans came up with language for that thing. And the thing goes beyond language. So the direct experience is typically like, oh, this is why people came up with the word God. Like, oh, this is what they were talking about. And that thing isn't the word God. The thing is a presence. It's an absolute form, like you say, of intelligence and field, existence, beyond shape and form. It seems to be creating the entire universe of shape and form that we're part of and perceiving, and is consistently present with all information. In essence, like all answers to all questions of the cosmos, and a recognition, like you say, that often we're not prepared for the answer, or we don't have the capacity to fully understand it. And so it's presented in a way that we can embrace in that moment. And it often comes with a deep sense of knowing, like a deep sense of getting it and a deep sense of fundamental awareness. I think we got presented ideas and ideologies about divinity in the form of religion and mythologies and stories. And what people are doing is rejecting the stories themselves. And then because of that rejection, not able to actually get to that fundamental essence. And I've been really interested in the last period of time about people's firsthand experiences of divinity, because to me, that's the next evolution in consciousness, is that we bridge the gap in the illogical expression of mythology, and we start to go into having firsthand experiences of this divine phenomena. How many times for you has that sort of presence appeared, and what are some of the different forms that it's taken?
For me, it's usually my goal to it's my intention to get to that place. So it happens quite often for me. And it presents itself in many different ways. On DMT, it has presented itself as the literal Mother Mary figure, which was beautiful. I didn't think that my mind would um, manifest this type of experience with with Christian iconography, which is strange because I asked myself then, what came first? Were the Christians, the Egyptians, and all of these religions, were they dabbling in psychedelics, and that's where they pulled these things from? Is that where they pulled the icons from? Or is my mind sort of projecting what I've known and learned over the years to the experience? And that to me is a very tough question to answer. But yeah, in terms of how it presents itself, I mean, in so many different ways and in undescribable ways. Sometimes it's not physical, it's not even visual. Sometimes it's just strictly mental. Sometimes behind closed eyes, when it takes on certain shapes, these shapes seem divine. And I think what's super interesting about mushrooms is, I believe Alan Watts said that you could see God in an ashtray, and I think the reason being, especially with mushrooms, is that mushrooms show connection. They present to you connection, and the more and more I learn about fungus and mycelial networks in general, the deeper understanding I have of sort of the intelligence of the mushroom itself, the psilocybin mushroom. And I do think that connection is such an important part, because fungal networks, they connect all of life. They connect the trees, they connect the plants. They are what allowed plants to evolve from being in water to land. They convert dead things back into energy and put that energy back into life. And to me, that's all about connection. So I think that is a, a big part of the way that the mushrooms present the divine or present God, because they present it in a way that it shows you that not only is this external, or it feels external from you, it also is you. And the experience of feeling yourself simultaneously as everything and everyone in the universe, but also as a singular individual, is a very transformative experience.
Yeah, I've thought of that experience as in, through, and all around, as a way to try to describe it. This divinity and the principle of it is in, through, and all around. And I always thought of the two teachings around you could find God anywhere. It's sort of a Christ teaching, look for me and you'll find me. And I tried to understand that concept. And I finally came to realize that by looking and focusing in your consciousness to the essence of divinity in anything, you're actually finding the aspect of that thing that is already divine, and that there is only an illusion of separation, that everything isn't fundamentally and ultimately divine. Like the matter itself, the things we study in physics are just expressions or aspects of the divine. Anything in the universe, anything in the cosmos is part of that. And I started to think of framing the universe, instead of like the astral picture of galaxies and stuff like that, which I believe exist, but the whole dimensionality of the universe in a sense as an aspect of God's body. Like if God were going to have a body, the whole universe would be it. I have a body made of trillions of cells and a bunch of microorganisms. I thought like, well, galaxies are like the little bacterial units inside my guts. They're just out there in God's body, but they're also part of God. Um, the idea of like mycelial networks, they're also part of God. And that will lead me to my next thought and question. So, I thought you could apply that teaching that you can pierce through the veil of separation by looking for divinity ultimately in anything. And when you connect with divinity, it doesn't matter whether you connect with it on a micro scale or a macro scale. That is now the connection, and the connection represents a form of oneness and absolute. Specifically about the mycelium networks, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially because of this advent of AI-based networks and neural nets and stuff like that. And I've been thinking about the mycelial networks fundamentally as another one of those expressions of the divine. But if then in their form itself, an aspect of that knowledge of being interconnected is there. And I wondered if, the more hierarchical a being gets, and the more ultimately mental, the more maybe isolated or separated it starts to think. Not that it is, but it starts to think in that way. And if the mycelial networks and the mushroom networks, which seem to always be a representation of an incredible amount of information and connection, are just living in that state. So, it doesn't require them to eat themselves, in essence, to always be connected into that divine state. And I wondered if you've had any experience with that.
Yeah, for sure. And it reminds me of sort of technology and AI being like this interconnected thing. But to me, what it brings up is like this, and this is something that I don't think AI can touch, is that, so you say the galaxies and all of that, that is like the body of God. Well, it seems to me that consciousness is like the dream of God, or maybe the experience of God. And the experience of God being an interconnected one, I think, as you were saying, is a very good comparison to the mycelial networks. It gives us life. It gives us everything. In the Eleusinian Mysteries, I think it was Cicero who said, which, if anyone doesn't know about the Eleusinian Mysteries, they were basically a psychedelic rite of passage that all of the ancient Greeks went through. Socrates, Plato. And Cicero, I believe, said that life without the mysteries is unlivable. So I love that because, and taking it sort of back to the mycelial networks, it's like we don't have life on the earth without the fungal networks that are under our feet all the time. And I think the metaphorical version of not having life without the mysteries is like not being able to live a fulfilled life that is sustainable without the connection to spirit, without the connection that these psychedelics give us.
Through your experience How do you define spirit?
I like to define spirit as almost synonymous with God, but I feel like it's more synonymous with soul because it's almost like we'll say it's in between soul and God. Like soul is that individual part of yourself that is the embodiment of God. God maybe can be defined as like the external part of, the realm. And then spirit is like that connection, that's why they're all, the guides are referred to as spirit guides that come and show themselves in manifestations that can help you. It's like they are your connection to the divine, spirit being the soul's connection to the all, like the unity of everything.
Yeah, the phenomena of spirit and spirits comes up a lot. And a lot of people are also, as they're, getting more into this, referring to ideas of entities and other kinds of encounters. Some people have mentioned what they think of as extraterrestrial experiences. Um, for you, what kind of things would you classify as spirits that you've encountered on these journeys?